What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, Jordon Martell. You're listening to the Martell Effect Combat Chronicles edition, where we talk about all the things going on in the world of combat sports today. Recapping all the cards from the week prior, both box changes and any news going on in the combat world, as well as predictions for the upcoming bouts. All will be discussed on this show. From the week from MMA fans, thank y'all for joining me. Hope y'all like it. The pilot for the main segment will hopefully be sometime in the next week or so. Been trying to get that situated, but in the meantime, figure I'd do something a little bit for the fight fans. That way, rather than just skimming over the combat sports, we can actually go in depth on all the cards. Plus, it's a little more easily digestible. It's easier to listen to a segment that's 45 minutes to an hour, rather than listening to a 2.5 hour podcast covering a bunch of shit that people may or may not want to listen to. Like a football or basketball fan might not necessarily want to listen to 20 to 30 minutes of MMA news before we get into the Super Bowl that's coming up. So like I said, this gives a little more structure, gives the viewer a little more power on what they want to actually listen to. But with all that, let's get right into it. But overall, quite a couple weeks, not too much news going on. Actually kind of surprised, especially with the holidays. Granted, the circumstances kind of made it difficult, but you would have figured with people being cooped up for damn near a year, that people would have got stir crazy and said fuck it and went out anyway. But not much of that happened. Of course, you got Mike Perry acting a damn fool again. I don't know what he did, but you see him on a surgery table getting sliced open. But nothing out of the ordinary there. Unfortunately, weekend you had a UFC bantamweight Irwin Rivera getting arrested on 2 counts of attempted murder and 2 counts of homicide against his 2 sisters, which is bullshit because nobody died. It's of course a moot point because both of them did get viciously hammered. But to play devil's advocate, it'd be nice if journalists stopped trying to stretch to the truth in stories just for a good headline. Because here's a severely mentally ill man that has voices in his head that are telling him that his life purpose is to kill his sisters. This boy done lost all the cheese off his crab. If he's lucky, he might be in a padded room for the rest of his life. There's not a doctor on this planet that can help his. And there's no way in hell you can integrate him back in public with how violent and unpredictable he could be fine. And he just committed that in that 11th year, the higher power comes back and tells him they certainly acting. And this is a side effect of brain trauma that doesn't get discussed as much as I feel like it should. Because when people think CTE and brain trauma, they think memory loss, impaired speech, maybe even confined to a wheelchair. But when a guy snaps like this, they tend to sweep it on the rug as the guy's just crazy. He's got mental health issues, without considering the possibilities to why maybe he snaps. Because according to one of his sisters that was injured in the attack, it had only been up to recent. According to her, that's why both her and her sister went down there. Because I guess a couple weeks even before that, he wasn't acting right. He stopped training, supposedly. He became isolated. And if I had to guess, I'm willing to bet that this is a side effect from the Giga Chikadze fight. Because Irwin took an absolute beating in that fight. Granted, he didn't get knocked out or knocked down, but he took some vicious shots over the course of that fight. Giga Chikadze hits hard as hell. He's a former glory kickboxer. He's got a head kick that was sent to hell in a handbasket. And oddly enough, it's the guys that appear to have the best chins and the guys that take the shots the best that always exhibit these specific symptoms of head trauma, where they get overly aggressive, they get violent out of nowhere, they get unpredictable, their mood shift, they lose their whole moral compass. This isn't just in MMA, it's in football, boxing, and maybe his career. You got it with Aaron Hernandez. I believe he was only about 27 years old, and he had the worst case of CTE that I had ever seen in any case, or at least in his age range, I forget which. Thousands and thousands of concussive shots later, he's found guilty for murdering 2 people. And only God knows how many cold cases. You got professional wrestler Chris Benoit, who has over 1,000 documented matches over the course of his career, right up until the tragic event of his murder-suicide in 2007, where over the course of a week, he killed his wife, Nancy Schultz, his son Daniel the following day, then lastly, and rightfully so on Sunday, made the decision to hang himself using one of his exercise machines in his home gym. If you'd like to educate yourself more on he's put out a 2-part documentary on YouTube, The Dark Side of the Ring, the Chris Benoit story, if I'm not mistaken. But if you intend on watching it and you do not like spoiler alerts, here's your warning. So when they're talking about the events that occurred in the household, you had Friday, him and his wife Nancy get into an argument, with him being a fucking gorilla and juiced to the gills like most WWE superstars are. And for many years, even still now, they attributed the reason for him snapping was, which I'm pretty sure 98% of the WWE superstars nowadays use them. Probably less, because now you got average looking guys like Kevin Owens who make this shit unbearable. So, probably a lot less now that I think about it. But back in 07, probably close to 98. But in a fit of rage, snaps his 5'5" bucking some chins, having like guys and guys average legitimately and then managed to fall asleep. Now I can't say for certain how exhausting snapping somebody in half is, let alone the person that you love. But I like to think no matter how exhausting something that heinous might be, they at least lose some fucking sleep and Chris like rest. But he managed to. Then following this good night's rest, proceeded to Google what the easiest and painless way to kill somebody is. This of course intended for his son Daniel, which had to be a last second change of heart because when autopsy and forensics showed up, because there had been a knife laying under Daniel's bed, and ultimately Chris decided to smother him with his pillow and proceeded to have another right before lastly taking a Now why I opt to bring this up, and I'm an idiot so don't quote me on any of this, if there are any FBI profilers, neuroscientists, psychologists, anybody that's well read that can that anybody I'd actually love to have you on the main segment if I could, to maybe go in depth on this. But if I'm not mistaken, there is a specific area in the frontal lobe. I believe it's located right in between the eyebrows. It's called the and neuroscientists have noticed a significant difference in either size and or damage to this area was a commonality trait between serial killers they've done autopsies on, as well as a reduction of gray matter in their brain. And the reasons why I see this to be relevant is that his finisher was a flying headbutt off of the top rope. Harley Race, who invented and trademarked this maneuver back in the 80s, he openly speaks on how much this maneuver has fucked him up and how he regrets creating it. He talks about all the spine problems, all the back problems he has from it. Only Lord knows what kind of thoughts he's having upstairs. And the Harley Race had nowhere near the schedule that Chris Benoit had. Back then, there was really no chair shots, which is another thing. This specific incident actually got chair shots banned from the WWE. When he came back, Benoit and but you lump that in with Chris Benoit having a merciless schedule, one in which he doesn't have any recovery time in between. He's mostly just jumping. So you got a man jumping off the top rope night in, night out, with nothing more than his face to hit. Never mind the added interest of an additional chair shot or two, depending on how violent the matchup was. Only to thrust him onto a plane the next day, without giving his brain any time to recover from the damage. And like we just talked about, if you're jumping off the top rope, slamming your face into the ground every night, which part of your brain is most likely going to absorb the most impacts? Your frontal lobe, right where the amygdala. Fast forward 20 years, 10,000 chair shots and 1,000 headbutts later, autopsy showed this 40-year-old man had the brain of an 80-year-old Alzheimer's patient. So by just sweeping this under the rug and calling it a roid rage incident, isn't really doing anything as far as taking preventative measures as to how they can prevent this incident in the future. Because when you listen to how this specific incident transpired, it seemed a lot less impulsive rather than it was well thought. And typically when you think of a roid rage incident, you think of an angry, aggressive, uncontrollable outburst. If it was a momentary fit and rage where he just killed his wife, then you could probably look to that being more the culprit. But if you can kill your wife, sleep like a baby that night, make a coffee that morning, and Google search how to kill your child, especially when he didn't even have anything to do with whatever the fuck you and your wife were going through. There's absolutely no reason that thought she even crossed her. And you would think if he was truly remorseful, he would have did it right after he did. Not go to bed a second straight night, only to ultimately kill yourself. More truly, so that tells me that he didn't want to kill himself. He didn't have a way out, so he had realized he was past the point of no return, and ultimately he came to the conclusion that taking his own life was better than him getting either life in prison, the death penalty. I'm not quite sure what Georgia's situation is. We are, after all, talking about the South, so I know good he depends. But I think it came down to that. I think it came down to him being stuck between a rock and a hard place. He chose to pick the lesser of two evils, which to him was leaving the world under his own control. I don't think it had anything to do with him not being able to live with his actions. Because like I said earlier, if you genuinely could not live with yourself for killing your entire family, then he would have done it that same night after killing Daniel. Not proceed to fall asleep yet another night, only to ultimately kill himself. To me, the only way that makes sense is if he was trying to find a solution out. Which tells me his regret was not that he killed his entire family, but that he didn't have an exit strategy. Now, for the record, I don't think Chris Benoit was this sadistic, malice, evil dude. Matter of fact, most of the people that work with him probably would tell you he was a phenomenal human being for 99.9% of the time that they knew him. Aside from this incident, and quite frankly, I don't condemn him for his actions. Because in my eyes, although the vessel that was known as Chris Benoit committed all these heinous actions, I think mentally it was not the same person altogether. I think 1,000 less chair shots and 1,000 less flying headbutts, that this probably never would have happened. But because he chose this occupation where he's enduring all this head trauma, constant abuse with no recovery time in between, and in doing so, he beat himself into being a sociopath. Moral of the story, if you're pursuing something like MMA, football, boxing, and even pro wrestling, these are the type of risks that you need to assess before you jump right into it. Because much like memory loss, Parkinson's disease, dementia, asking yourself, am I going to be able to walk at 45 or am I going to need a wheelchair? This too comes in that same exact bundle when you gamble your life away on that dotted line. Irwin Rivera took the gamble fighting Giga Chikadze, a guy that's well above his weight class. Honestly, could be a 55er. Irwin Rivera, natural 135er. Would honestly be surprised if he had to cut 3 pounds. But Irwin gets the call from the UFC at a time during the pandemic when all the gyms are closed and the UFC is desperate for fighters. He sees an opportunity that he can't pass up. He sees the opportunity to change his life forever, takes the risk, takes the gamble, opts to fight the much bigger opponent because he has no idea when an opportunity like this will ever spawn up again. And that gamble very well could have cost him the remainder of his life, because there's a very good chance he spends the rest of it in a padded room with a straitjacket on. That's why the young cats coming up, it is crucial that y'all treat your health and wellness with the utmost respect. Conduct yourself as a business, because that is essentially what you are. You are an independent contractor that works in the business of yourself. You ultimately have the final say in what path your career takes, because at the end of the day, you're the one signing on that dotted line. There's nobody forcing that pen in your hand, forcing you to sign that piece of paper. So it's your responsibility as the athlete putting yourself on the line to not put yourself in situations where you're going to take a lot of abuse, suffer a lot of damage, take years off your career as well as your life, all for some short-sighted opportunity. And taking a short notice fight against a guy that's a whole weight class, maybe 2 above you, only to make a little bit more than what you would on the regional scene, because he did take the loss. So he ultimately got about $3,500 for that fight because it was his rookie deal. Rather than just staying on the regional scene, continue developing, wait for opportunity. one that's a lot. Probably walk away with the win as well. And at worst, he's losing maybe $500 to not take an ass whooping from Giga Chikadze. And for what? So he could have the prestige of calling himself a UFC fighter. And hopefully young guys use this as a catalyst as to what business decisions to make throughout their career, to trust the process, not push the narrative, and to not jump on the first deal that's handed to you, because odds are it's not going to be the best one. And I always say the premier example as far as business management for a fighter, of course, Floyd Money Mayweather. He's the highest paid, he's undefeated. And why is this? Because he's carefully calculated in what bouts he chooses. He doesn't bite off more than he can chew. He sets himself up for a position that's best suited for him. For example, when he fought Canelo fights close to 168, has been fighting out light heavyweight, which is 175, and he made Canelo drop all the way down to 147, damn near putting him on death's doorstep. And as a result, he still remains to be the only blemish on Canelo's record. When he fought Manny Pacquiao, he waited till he was well past his prime before he signed on that dotted line. And because of that, he was able to win their matchup. Floyd did not become a 9-figure decision by letting his ego get in the way of his decision making. Now, would it have been a more respectful feat had he not fought a malnourished, deplenished Canelo? Maybe at 154, 158? Yes. Would it have been a more respectful victory if he had beat Manny at his prime? Yes. But why risk taking the L when your entire business model is off of you being undefeated? That 50-0 goes, there's no more TMT. There's no more Mayweather Productions. All that shit goes away. So as a fighter, which one would you rather be? The smart businessman? The one that treats himself accordingly? Doesn't risk his brand over a tough guy image? Has all his wits intact? Can speak in full sentences? And on top of that, he's driving every car you want? Living in everybody's dream home? Can sleep with anyone when he picks out of a crowd, and that's with a domestic charge. And this can all be you if you don't take risks. But with that, we'll move right into the first boxing card. Ryan García versus Luke Campbell. Ryan García taking on the first real test of his career. Answered a lot of unresolved questions. How does he handle adversity? Can he get knocked down and battle back? How does he hold up when it's a dogfight? But it's safe to say he laid a lot of those questions to rest. To be able to outclass a world-class boxer like Luke Campbell, especially with the resume he has, the lightweight division in boxing is looking to be pretty stacked. Because now you got Devin Haney, you got Gervonta Davis, you still got Vasily Lomachenko, Teofimo Lopez, now Ryan García. So many options to pick from. But we'll speak more on that a little later. But first, I want to get into the prelims some. First, a couple bouts that didn't make the DAZN feature prelim. 3 of them to be exact. Which I don't know why you would hire 6 fighters only to not air their fights. But I don't run the fight promotion. But first up on the card, you had Tristan Colcruth versus Jorge Armando Martinez. Colcruth shaping up to be a killer early. Only 19 years of age, already sleeping everybody. He's definitely looking like somebody that's ahead of his years, especially in the cruiserweight division where the talent pool is not as deep. You can definitely look to give him top competition early. But before you start throwing him in with the dogs right away, I'd maybe look to give him somebody with a winning record first. Because as of right now, only one of his opponents has an above 50 winning percentage. But all in all, he's coming along nicely. I'd say maybe 4 years' time he'll be fighting for a title. All depending on how his journey unfolds, of course. He is young though, so plenty of time, no sense in rushing it. But following that, you had a debuting Asia Stevenson taking on a 6-8-3 Francisco Bonello. Asia Stevens, if I'm not mistaken, was a glory kickboxer. They, of course, not doing too well with the pandemic and everything, so I'm imagining that's why he switched over. More money in boxing anyway. Kickboxing really doesn't get its due diligence. but Asia Stevens wins by unanimous decision in a 4-rounder. Again, I didn't get to see this one, thanks to DAZN not wanting to air all the prelims. I want to know, you can really give Asia Stevens anybody at this point in time. Already a lot of fight experience. Has 41 amateur boxing bouts. And like I said, I believe he fought in Glory Kickboxing. So you could maybe look to push him more than most fighters. But in the bantamweight division, they currently got him resting around that 300th spot. Maybe give him a guy that has roughly the same record as him right now. That's like 3-0, 2-0. That way he gets some good competitive rounds in. That way he's not wasting time taking bouts with cans. Especially when he already has a high fight IQ. Along with loads of fight experience at the early age of 20. So it'd be interesting to get to see what he does. Hopefully DAZN airs it next time. Following that, you had the ladies taking the stage. You had Franchon DAZN taking on Ashley Curry. DAZN took this one by unanimous decision, sweeping all the rounds and all the judges' scorecards. Pretty much went as expected. Ashley very durable. I believe she has about 25 fights. Only been finished within the distance one time. DAZN not one would call a power hitter, but very technical, very skilled. She moves on to 7-1 with her only blemish being Clarissa Shields. Olympic gold medalist, so no shame in losing that one. This now thrusts her at number 5 in the super middleweight division for females. Putting her right around the realm of Alejandra Jimenez, who she just fought in her prior bout, which she did lose, which was overturned to a no contest. For what reason, I'm not quite sure on. But with that being a decisive, clear-cut victory in the way of Jimenez, I wouldn't necessarily book that rematch right away. I'd actually like to see DAZN maybe get a couple more bouts before she starts clawing at that top 5 spot. Because a lot of dangerous girls in that top 5 area. Like I said, Alejandra Green, very dangerous. I believe out of her 12 wins, 9 of them are by knockout, so very heavy hands. Right beneath Ashley Curry, though, at number 11th, you had Shadeja Green, who's 7-0, which I thought would have been a way better test for DAZN, personally. I thought it would have done a lot more as far as pushing her career. Ashley Curry, although as durable as she is, beating somebody with an 8-13-4 record isn't exactly going to buy you much argument for a title shot. So by beating somebody like Shadeja Green, who's on the rise, definitely would have voted for a stronger statement. Shadeja Green, of course, very fucking dangerous, with only one of her opponents being able to make it all the way through with her. So a bit of a risky matchup, but in the super middleweight division for women, you got a lot more leeway to take losses. Like I just said, Alicia Curry, 8-13-4, and she's right around the top 10. So I don't think it'd be too costly for DAZN if she were to take a risky bout. One that if she loses, it won't knock her too far down on the totem pole. But on the other hand, if she wins, she very well could be looking at a title shot next. Especially with Clarissa Shields moving to MMA. Very big void at the top for that division. So rather than having Clarissa sweep the entire division, you get a lot more potential outcomes as far as getting a new champ in that division. Elena Cederos, Alicia Espinoza. Just beneath that top 5 at number 7, you got Latia Robinson. So endless possibilities for that super middleweight title. Really could be any one of those females. And of course, you can throw DAZN right in there with the mix. But next year's going to be very competitive for the super middleweight division for females. Believe it or not, I do have Shadeja Green potentially getting the title by the end of the year. Maybe at the beginning of 2022. I just think her development's been leaps and bounds above the competition. Along with none of the girls really being able to match her power. Alejandra is probably the only one that really can. So I can't wait to see that matchup in the future. But I'm intrigued to see. And actually one more before the DAZN feature prelim. I guess there was actually 4 bouts that didn't get aired. So that marks 4 out of the 9 bouts that didn't get aired on DAZN. Which is half the fucking card pretty much. Get your shit together, Eddie Hearn. Fucking scamming people out here. Of course, what do you expect from a boxing promoter? But you had Alex Rancone maintain his undefeated status. Moving on to 8-0. Sweeping his 6-round affair against Sergio Gonzalez. winning all the rounds on all three judges' scorecards. This was a good test for Alex Rincon conditioning-wise. Sergio Gonzalez, a very tough guy to put away. At a 15 bounce, only been put away one time, so very durable. And Alex Rincon, a very powerful junior middleweight. This marks only his second fight, has gone to distance. I'd maybe like to see him get a couple more fighters with winning records under their belt. Only 2 out of his 8 victories have been against a guy that has above 50% winning percentage. So maybe start to push the action some with him. Right now he's resting around 300, so maybe look to give him a journeyman with a slightly above average record. Maybe like a 19-12, a 20-15, with a couple draws mixed in with it. Nothing too crazy that he can't handle, but definitely with somebody that's going to give him fits in there, maybe take a couple rounds from him. Keep his ego in check, keep him honest. Now with that, we move on to the DAZN feature prelim. Kicking off that, we had brother Ryan García, Shane Garcia, taking on Rene Marquez. So fun thing about Shane Garcia, according to his brother Ryan, is that I guess he doesn't actually train for his bouts. How true that actually is, I have no clue. But supposedly he doesn't really care to be a boxer. He just does it to do it, which is a weird thing to do just for the fucks of it, but hey, my well-being. But supposedly his real aspirations are being a police officer, which all the props to him. Being a police officer is probably the hardest job on the planet, or at least one of the hardest. And I'm a firm believer that all police officers should have some sort of self-defense or some sort of discipline as far as martial arts is concerned. I think if you had more guys like Chris Dawkins and Trevin Giles, who are both UFC fighters, but also full-time police officers as well. Chris Dawkins is an officer in Philadelphia. Giles, an officer in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember quite where. I believe Houston. But I believe the police force should be compiled of a bunch of these guys who not necessarily are professional fighters, but at least trained in the disciplines of fighting. So that way they're better prepared and more handily equipped to deal with confrontational and hostile situations. That way their first instinct is not to reach for the gun every single time. But that'll be a conversation for another day. Overall, for supposed to be a guy who doesn't train, Shane Garcia didn't look too damn bad. I say clear cut, he definitely won half of the rounds. I personally tallied it as a draw between him and Marquez. For sure, it can give Garcia 3 out of the 4 rounds. The third I definitely gave to Marquez. I definitely think he hit some significant shots in that round and really conducted the pace that round. I did have Marquez edging out the first round just due to inactivity on both ends. I thought he was slightly more aggressive. But overall, I have no problem with Garcia taking it. And despite being somebody who's absolutely against draws, I think they're fucking grotesque. They just do not look right on anybody's record. That being said, I would have liked to see Marquez maybe pull out the draw for this one. I would like to see him get rewarded for a strong showing, because here's a guy that's 5-5, hasn't fought in 2.5 years, taking on an undefeated talent, an uncommitted one, but undefeated nonetheless. Give him hell for all 4 rounds. Without a doubt, at least stole one of them. And I think a draw would serve as enough of a slap on the wrist for Shane Garcia. Like I said before, I don't think he lost the fight per se, but Marquez did give Garcia some fits, so I do think there should be some sort of blemish on Garcia's record, especially with Marquez being a 5-5 journeyman. There's of course not a knock on Marquez, but if you're Shane Garcia and you're heavily favored to beat this man, and you let him hang in there with you for 4 rounds, then you deserve to have it count against you some. But nonetheless, he racked it up as a win, moves on to 6-0. If he decides he would like to take it serious and continue to pursue it, he's currently sitting right around that 500 spot for the featherweight division. But with him not necessarily being that committed at this point in time, I wouldn't really be looking to give him anybody that's above the skill level of Marquez right now. Otherwise, you could be looking at him getting seriously fucking hurt. So if I had to give him anybody, I'd say maybe give him a slight step up in competition. If not, dial it back slightly. You got this Afghani cat, Yusuf Ali, who's resting at 501. He's 7-8-1 for his record. Has a couple knockout losses, so that might be a nice little tune-up fight for Garcia. A little further back, you got South Korean journeyman Hunboo Lee. He's currently got a 6-4 record with 1 win in between the distance, and has never been finished. So that'd be a good guy to get some rounds in against. Not necessarily somebody that's going to put your lights out or take years off your career, but durable to the point where you're going to get some quality rounds against him. In the case that you do put him out, it still looks impressive on your record, because out of his 11 bouts, nobody's been able to do it yet. So given his current commitment to the sport, I'd maybe look to aim him in that direction. It really is kind of a shame, though, that he's not that committed, because he is pretty talented. But the ironic part of that is it's always the guys that are not necessarily the least committed, but don't necessarily have the same passion as others that tend to go the furthest, because they're not putting the additional pressure on themselves that maybe a guy that's anxious and eager for the opportunity would. But who knows? He's only 20, so he's got a lot of time to develop, a lot of time to figure out what he wants to do. Following that, you had undefeated Raul Correll moving on to 9-0, putting away seasoned journeyman Ramses Agatone in the second round via corner stoppage. Overall, Raul looked phenomenal. Did an excellent job of mixing up the body and head. Looked very ahead of his years, only 25 years of age. Showed excellent fight IQ. Managed to pick up a body shot knockdown in the first round. Overall, flawless performance on Raul's end. Granted, it's hard to pick apart a 4-minute fight that you were handily dominating the entire time. But if I had to say, that's probably the best Raul we've seen so far. I'd say 1 or 2 more, he's definitely ready for top flight competition. Despite Raul being early on in his professional career, he made it a notion to fight guys with winning records. Just under half his guys have a winning percentage above 50%, which is a great look on his end, especially the way he's been finishing those fights. Has essentially starched all but 2 of his opponents, putting him at 125th in the super welterweight rankings, which I'd say is pretty reasonable. Like I said, it definitely helps his case that he's fighting guys with winning records. But what I think would serve Raul best at this current point in time would be, since most of the guys with winning records he's fought have all been guys that are susceptible to being finished. And at this current point in time, Ramses Agatone is the most dangerous boxer he's faced as far as punching power and being able to put him away. So I'd maybe like to see him get thrown into the fire some. Take on somebody with a good chin as well as heavy hands. Somebody that's really going to make it a dogfight and test him mentally. Potentially maybe even serve him his first knockdown. A couple matchups I personally would like to maybe see out of Raul. Right in front of him, you got New Zealander Wade Ryan, who isn't a power puncher per se. He's only got about a 20% finishing rate, but 17-9, very durable. Odds are he's going to be in there with Raul from start to finish. Work his cardio some, let him experience all the rounds. You also got Charles Bellamy at 117. He's currently 28-4-2. 18 finishes, never been finished with inside the distance. By age 39, Father Time's starting to catch up with him. His reaction time's not the same. He can't move like he used to, but still has the capability of giving Raul a run for his money if he's not careful. Someone like Australian Tommy Brown would probably be perfect. Journeyman, record 42-7-2. Out of 51 fights, only been finished 3 times. So durable as all hell. 18 KO wins out of 42. So still presents some danger. A little fresh on the legs at 37. And for the most part, been on one hell of a tear, actually. He's actually won 16 out of his last 18, one of those being a draw. His last loss was against a very violent Anthony Mundy. Did get violently KO'd in that one. But prior to that, has not lost since 2008. Now, there was a 5-year layoff in between that time and his next win, but whatever adjustments he made clearly seemed to be working. So if I were to play matchmaker, I'd say that's Raul's best matchup right now. Has really seasoned, has the potential to hurt him, and odds are he's going to push him the whole 6 to 8 rounds. And with that, we bring to you the title matchups. First one out of the triple header, you had Felix Alvarado, light flyweight world champ, taking on the minimum weight champ, which is 105. DJ Krell recently vacated his belt. That being due to lack of pay, because I guess even as the champ at 105, he was only getting paid about $50K per bout, which is actually pretty fucked considering what boxers typically make. Never mind a world champion. But considering you got guys in the UFC who are getting chump change in comparison to that, and they're taking head kicks, shins, knees to the face, and taking $50K for some rapid punches from a pygmy don't sound too bad. Meanwhile, 3-pound tire at 108, you got Felix Alvarado that hits like a fucking street sweeper. And all the props to DJ, man, tough as hell. He hung in there the best he could with Felix, but his shots just did not carry the same weight behind them. And if I'm not mistaken, the punch count was actually pretty damn close, considering what the bout looked like. But again, DJ Creel moving up a whole entire weight class, taking on the champ in that division. And one may say, yeah, it's 3 pounds, but DJ has weighed in as late as 103. So in all honesty, he probably could have kept going down in weight. And Felix actually has a couple bouts at flyweight. Has weighed in as high as 113. So although they're relatively the same size, Felix a lot more denser than DJ is. A lot more muscle, a lot more explosive. All in all, I thought it was a pretty big jump for DJ, especially with that being his first bout at light flyweight. I would like to see him maybe get his feet wet in the division first, take on a couple top 20s, top 10s. Because although, yes, again, 3-pound difference, a lot of those guys are cutting down to that weight, so they're naturally closer to 125, 130, whereas minimum weights are typically closer to their fighting weight. DJ probably only weighs about $110, so I would like to see him maybe get used to the size difference a little more. But nonetheless, Felix Alvarado and still the light flyweight champ. He's going to be a tough one to find a fight for, man. That's hard to wrap your mind around considering he's the champ, but the man's just so dangerous. The man slept 31 out of 38 of his opponents. I mean, this puts him at third in the rankings now. Only 2 people ahead of him are Kenshiro Teraji and Hiroto Kayaguchi. Both guys undefeated. Hiroto is 14-0. Kenshiro 17-0. Of course, a little bit behind him, you got Carlos Canales. He's at number 5. Another very dangerous flyweight. He's a guy that carries a similar type of power as Felix. He's currently 22-0-1 with 17 knockouts to his name. But Felix's next opponent's going to have to be somebody that doesn't err on the side of caution, somebody that hasn't been knocked out before, somebody that's like these guys that are undefeated. Because somebody that's been knocked out or badly beaten is not going to want to take a matchup with Felix Hernandez, title or no title. Not without being properly compensated at least. So if I'm Eddie Hearn, I'm trying to get the best bang for my buck. I'm avoiding guys that have taken hard losses unless I absolutely have to. Because by looking to book a guy with an undefeated record, you're essentially signing a guy that's ignorant to what kind of danger he's getting himself into. Therefore, as a promoter, you can potentially get him at a lower price because he may not be taking into consideration a hazard pay, because the thought of losing doesn't cross their mind. Whereas a guy that's been through the ringer, been through wars, been knocked out before, they tend to consider these factors more often because they've already been there before. They've taken the ass whooping. They've been hospitalized. They've been floored to the canvas. They've woke up not realizing where the fuck they are. And they realize that shit ain't fun. So it's a good chance that they are not signing on the line with that Nicaraguan nightmare, unless it's the biggest payday of their damn life. And rightfully so. But following that, you had his brother in the co-main event. Rene Alvarado defend his super featherweight strap against Roger Gutierrez. This is a rematch from back in 2017 where Rene Alvarado knocked out Roger Gutierrez in the 7th out of 8. Back then, Gutierrez only 22, so at that point, still developing in his career. And Rene was already an established nightmare by that time. Rene actually swept all the rounds on all the judges' scorecards prior to scoring the knockout in the 7th. The second time out, though, Gutierrez showed some serious maturity. Was a lot more poised and disciplined this time around. Didn't come out like a bat out of hell trying to get the knockout. Managed to display a little more controlled chaos. Gutierrez scored 3 knockdowns on Alvarado in the 3rd round, which actually ended up hurting Gutierrez more than it did help him. Because by getting those 2 knockdowns, although he didn't get carried away and chasing the knockout, he still did gas himself and trying to get the finish. But at that point, what fighter really wouldn't? Because you got the guy hurt twice. He's on wobbly legs. You figure he's about to fall at any second, and somehow he makes it through that round. Now here you are left with 9 more rounds to go and you depleted half your damn gas tank. I don't necessarily think it's fair to say it was mismanagement of his gas tank. I just think it was a bad combination of him scoring the knockdowns early on in the fight, mixed with him facing a tough, durable guy like Rene Alvarado. Out of 41 fights, he's only been knocked out once. And it actually wasn't even a knockout. Alvarado got a cut over his eye. I believe it was in the 8th round. And for whatever reason, I guess the California Commission, at that time, I don't think they do it anymore, rules medical injuries as knockouts. So, in technicality, has never been knocked out. So I suppose you can make a little bit of an argument that Gutierrez was a little hasty in going for the knockout, considering how tough and durable his opposition was, but wound up fizzling in some of the middle rounds. But Alvarado managed to battle back and make it interesting. Of course, with Gutierrez depleting himself trying to get the knockout, he faded a little bit in those rounds. Still hung in there enough, though, to keep him honest. Was pretty much dead even right up until that last round. Gutierrez managed to dig deep, scored another knockdown in the 12th, which essentially solidified him the victory. And with that, you got a new super featherweight champ. But to be honest, that one was so close. Honestly, love to see that one get run back for a third time. I think there's a very strong case for an immediate rematch. I still personally scored it in favor of Rene. Aside from the rounds Gutierrez got the knockdowns, I really didn't have him winning too many rounds after that. I'd maybe have to watch it again. But I just feel that one was so close and it was such an entertaining match. Why the fuck not? So I say book that shit in August. And of course, last but not least, you had Ryan García taking on cool hand Luke Campbell. This, of course, was the first true test for Ryan García. Is he all hype? Is he really the prodigy that everybody says he is? How will he handle adversity? How will he respond when he finally gets knocked down? I think a lot of those questions got answered in this fight. Absolutely outclassed Luke Campbell. Managed to put him away by TKO in the 7th. Ryan, however, did face some adversity early on. Luke Campbell caught Ryan García with a hook to put him down in the 2nd. The first of Ryan Garcia's professional career. But responded beautifully to it. Responded how you expect the champ to. He had a short-term memory, didn't let it linger in his mind, and essentially stole all the rounds after that. The 2nd round was actually the only one I scored in favor of Luke Campbell. This makes the lightweight division in boxing super fun. A lot of potential matchups you can make. I wouldn't be surprised if you see the title change hands quite a few times in the next couple of years. Because right now you got Ryan García at number 5. And as right now ahead of him are Devin Haney, Vasily Lomachenko, Gervonta Davis, and Teofimo Lopez. The insane part about this is there's a very good chance that one of these guys, or multiple of them, don't become a world champion. That would be an absolute travesty because all these guys are super talented. It's literally the equivalent of Charles Barkley being in the Hall of Fame without a ring. Like if I had to pick one out of the 5, I'd say Devin Haney probably never sees a world title. You of course have Vasily Lomachenko, who's recently removed as the world champ. Lost that to Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez, of course, the current world champ. So if I had to pick between Devin Haney, Gervonta Davis, and Ryan García never seeing a world title, undoubtedly I'd probably say Devin Haney. Matter of fact, I believe that's who Ryan García called out next. But I say that or Gervonta Davis makes the most sense. All 3 of those guys are right around the same age range. All 3 more or less on the same trajectory. All 3 guys undefeated, of course. I think the experience of Loma would probably be a little too much for Ryan García too soon. If I had to put it in order, I'd say give him Devin Haney first, Gervonta Davis second. Then if you can get past Lomachenko, then give him Teofimo Lopez. Now, I don't think he beats Teofimo Lopez. There are Gervonta Davis for that matter. If he does end up fighting Devin Haney next, I do think he'll put him away relatively quickly. Haney primarily a defensive tactician. However, Ryan García has a special talent for finding that chin. And Haney hasn't really even so much as been clipped so far. So when he finally does get caught, I think it's going to catch him off guard. And of course, it's always the ones that you're not expecting that are always the ones that put you out. So I think Ryan García more than likely is probably going to find that chin somewhere around the 5th round. As for Luke Campbell, there was some talk about him potentially retiring if he doesn't win this bout. Luke realized it was going to be a long climb to the top for him to ever see a world title shot again. And I do see where it's come from considering the murders row we just listed off. I do agree it would be a very long climb to the top if he even sees it again. Because as world class as Luke Campbell is, he just cannot seem to clear the top 5 for whatever reason. He's missing that last little bit, that last little notch to put him over the top, everybody. Whether it's his reaction time being a little slower, maybe he's a half a step behind everybody, maybe his opponent's cardio is just a little bit better than his, but for whatever reason, he just can't seem to clear the bar. That being said, I think it's a little early to jump into retirement. I think the best thing for his career would maybe to go up in a weight class, reinvent himself at super lightweight. At super lightweight, you really don't have that much depth in the division. And as of right now, super lightweight doesn't have this established dominant champ yet. The title's changed hands quite a few times as of recent. Since the belt was vacated by Terrence Crawford back in 2017, the belt has already changed hands twice since then. So at least there, Luke Campbell might have a little bit of an opportunity to do something. Pack on a couple more pounds, fill out some. Might actually find that he's a lot stronger at that weight class. Doesn't have to cut as much weight. Maybe have him and Josh Taylor go at it in O2 Arena. That'd be a nice little matchup to maybe get his feet wet in the division. But we'll see what happens. He's only 33. I'd hate to see a talented fighter like that cut his potential short. Essentially wondering what could have been had he not cut his career short, especially in his prime at 33. Best advice I can give, reinvent yourself, move up in a weight class. Then if you can't make it happen there, then you did the best you could with what you had. Not a damn soul can say it was due to lack of trying. But essentially that is all I have for you guys this week. Close it out with the picks for this coming weekend. Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar. UFC on ABC. First up, you got Jacob Kilburn versus Austin Lingo. Kilburn fairly well-rounded. Very good striker, brings the fight every single time. Austin Lingo, very good striker in his own right, very heavy-handed. Tends to finish his fights relatively quickly. If his fights have not gone to a decision, which he's only done 3 times, his other 5 fights have come within the opening minutes. This is more than likely going to be a stand-up war the entire way through. In the case of that happening, I have Austin Lingo winning it. Both guys have relatively the same level of stand-up. Austin Lingo's power really makes up the difference. Otherwise, it's a fairly identical matchup. Jacob Kilburn is prone to being submitted, though. All 3 of his losses have come by way of submission. Austin Lingo's only losses come by way of decision, and that was in his UFC debut, which most people tend to lose anyway. So now that he has the octagon jitters out of the way, I see Austin Lingo taking this one in the second round by a TKO finish. Second up, you got Sarah Morris versus Vanessa Mello. This more than likely a pink slip match. Sarah has won 1 in her last 5. Vanessa has yet to win in her 3-fight stint with the UFC. Vanessa also doesn't exactly have the same finishing capability that Sarah has. And Sarah, a very cagey vet that's been around for a long time. That being said, 5 of the 6 times Sarah's lost has been decided by the judges' scorecards. And out of the 6 fights Sarah's gone a distance, she's only won 1 of them. So if Vanessa can't survive the full 15 with her, she has a pretty good chance. All in all, I don't see that happening, though. I think Sarah's experience with elite competition is going to prove to be the factor in this one. So I have Sarah taking this one by TKO via ground and pound, second round. Third up, you got Ramazan Emeev versus David Zawada. Ramazan, much like most Dagestanis, very exceptional on the ground, phenomenal wrestler. Strong as a bear, good submission artist. Deadly ground and pound. Zawada, fairly talented all the way around. Not exceptional in one specific area, though. From past bouts I've seen with Zawada, he does tend to get put on his back quite a bit. And if he can't avoid the takedown with Emeev, I see it being a very long night for him. Zawada, a fairly decent submission artist off his back, but I think he's going to struggle to get the space in order to pull off a submission against Emeev. So I got Ramazan Emeev winning it by unanimous decision. Appropriately enough, fourth in the lineup, you have 2 power hitters. You got heavyweights Carlos Felipe versus Justin Tafa going at it. Both guys very good finishing capability, very heavy hands. Where Carlos gains a lot of separation as far as tools on Tafa is on the ground. In past fights that I've seen him in the regional scene, very good top control, solid fundamental jiu-jitsu. Not somebody you're going to ever see go for a submission, but very good ground and pound. Justin Tafa, strictly a kickboxer coming out of New Zealand, protege under Mark Hunt, but much like his mentor, not a whole lot of know-how on the ground. So if Carlos Felipe comes in with a strong game plan and utilizes the grappling disadvantage, then I don't see any reason that he shouldn't be able to take this one in the first round. So Carlos Felipe, first round ground and pound stoppage. Up fifth, you got Ep.1 versus Joseline Edwards. Joseline making her UFC debut. 9-2 fighter out of King's MMA. Very talented camp in California. Produced talents such as Kelvin Gastelum, Marvin Vettori. So she has a very good unit around her. Haven't really seen too much on her, but seems like a pretty well-rounded finisher. 5 TKO wins and 3 submission wins. Only 1 by decision. Her most recent loss came at the hands of Sarah Alper in a 5-round fight in LFA. So definitely has the cardio to hang in there with Wu. Wu Yan, a talented 24-year-old out of China. She's currently 11-3. Good finisher in her own right. A lot of TKO finishes. 7 out of her 11. She is struggling to find a foothold in the UFC though, with Yan only winning 1 out of her 3 matchups in the UFC. Her only loss via finish did come at the hands of UFC vet Yana Kunsakai, so that's nothing she can really hang her head on. Yana currently ranked in the bantamweight division. I believe she's 8th. So Yan's really only lost to UFC caliber females, just because I think octagon jitters are probably going to play a factor in this one. I think I'm going to give this one to Wu Yan, but via split decision. I think it's going to be a very close one. At number 6, we got Norsdan Imavov versus Phil Hawes. Imavov fought Jordan Williams in his debut. I believe that was a 185 contest. And he looked big as hell. He looked like he could easily be a 205er. Although he is listed at 170, so I'm not quite sure what weight this bout's going to take place at. But I was really impressed with Imavov's first showing against Jordan Williams. Jordan Williams, a very tough kid. Is a bit of a tweener though, because he is diabetic and he can't cut weight. So by default, he is going to give up a couple pounds to his opponent anyway. Nonetheless, Imavov had a very impressive showing, almost finished Jordan a couple times. Philip Hawes is a guy that's been trying to break into the UFC for a while now. Tried out for the Ultimate Fighter. Lost in his qualification bout against Andrew Sanchez. That was back when he was 3-0. Won on the Contender Series twice. First time around, got knocked out by Julian Marquez. Second time around, much more successful. Beat Hadzamor Bestiev. That was by a first round knockout. In his debut, I don't want to say he had an easy go of it, but he definitely fought a guy that wasn't up to the caliber or fought the same type of competition that Phil Hawes had. He fought a 4-0 Jacob Malcone, who up to that point had not fought anybody up to the caliber of Phil Hawes. Never mind the fact that it was Jacob Malcone's first big show. Until he go from the regional scene all the way to the big dance. Never mind a fucking pay-per-view. The main card at that, not even the prelims. It was all pretty much a perfect storm to set Malcone up for failure. Maybe that's just the UFC's attempt at building him up. But either which way, very big step up in competition from Malcone all the way up to Imavov. And Phil Hawes tends to struggle in situations where he's not the bigger fighter. And in this case, Imavov, like I said, very big 185er. I'm assuming that's the weight this fight's going to take place at. But very easily could be a 205er. And both of Hawes' losses have come by finish. And given the way Hawes likes to come out the gate in all of his fights, never seen the judges' scorecard, so I don't see this one lasting very long. I have Imavov taking it in the first round by knockout. With that, we move into the main card. Punali Soriano versus Dusko Todorovic. Without a doubt, a fight of the night candidate. Punali Soriano, an undefeated Hawaiian, fighting out of Extreme Couture. That right off the bat tells you he's got phenomenal takedown defense. I can't imagine a world where somebody does train under Randy Couture and they can't stop a takedown. But strong kid, has NyQuil in both hands. Haven't even really seen him in trouble up to this point. Todorovic, very technical all around. Great stand-up. Great ground and pound, a fairly decent wrestler, good grappler, but with the vast majority of his TKO finishes come by way of ground and pound for the most part. Because although he can hurt you standing up, Todorovic's not one to necessarily put you out on your feet. Punali, on the other hand, definitely will if you give him the chance. So the only way I really see Todorovic pulling it out is if he manages to take Soriano down. With Soriano's takedown defense being so good, and the fact that he spends most of his time standing, I think if there ever comes a time or a situation where Punali gets put on his back, I'm willing to bet it's going to be like a shark on land. He's not really going to know what to do. And from there, Todorovic would be able to utilize his ground and pound. But with Soriano's takedown defense being so good, I don't foresee that happening. I see Punali being the one that's going to dictate the action, control the pace, control where the fight goes. If I had to guess, he's going to make it ugly, make it a war. Because Todorovic, a very lengthy, technical fighter, doesn't really like to fight in the phone booth too much. And that's right where Punali thrives. So unless Todorovic can get that takedown early, then I got Punali pulling it out in the first round by knockout. At 8, you got Joaquin Buckley versus Alessio Di Chirico. Joaquin, of course, a hot topic right now. A lot of traction. All stemming from him potentially scoring the greatest knockout of all time over Impa Kasanganay. Caught him with a beautiful spinning back kick. I wouldn't be surprised if you can find it on YouTube. You can go check it out. But after suffering that loss to Kevin Holland, he's now on a 2-fight win streak. And given the way Kevin Holland's been starching everybody, you can probably give Joaquin a little bit of a pass, especially because he got all the way to the third round with him. So that tells you how durable Joaquin is. Alessio Di Chirico, a very seasoned vet. I imagine he's probably fighting for his job on this one. He's currently on a 3-fight losing skid. So if he loses this one, that would make 4 in a row. So I can't imagine with the UFC having their mass layoff that they keep Alessio. But if he can derail the hype train that is Joaquin Buckley right now, I think all will be forgiven. And I don't think it's that easy of a fight for Joaquin. Alessio is an extremely durable dude. He actually went to a decision with Kevin Holland. Also lost, but managed to not get hurt the entire fight. Matter of fact, Alessio hasn't even so much as been dropped yet. Doesn't have any KO losses on his record. All 5 but 1 have been by a decision. That one came at the hands of a submission loss. It came via triangle choke by Eric Spicely, but very talented jiu-jitsu guy. And as of right now, Joaquin hasn't really shown too much as far as grappling. So I'm willing to bet that he's not going to be going for the submission in this one. But if he can't put Di Chirico away, it very well could be a problem for him. Because Di Chirico, a very well-rounded fighter, has some submission skills. So if he can wear on Joaquin and maybe weather the storm, by that third round he might be tired enough to where Di Chirico can maybe take him down, potentially pull off a submission win. But with how active Joaquin's been, I'm willing to bet that he's going to have his cardio under control for this one. I don't think Joaquin's going to pull out the hat trick with a third knockout victory in a row, but I do have him winning the bout. If I had to guess, probably by unanimous decision. He'll probably take the first 2 and then Di Chirico will get the last. Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Li Jiangliang. This is Santiago's first matchup since fighting Neil Magny back in 2018, so quite a long layoff. You throw that in mixed with a pandemic and the mass shut down all the gyms in the country, it's going to be difficult to say how Santiago's cardio base is going to be. I'm willing to bet it's probably not going to be great. And Li Jiangliang has remained pretty active for the most part. He did take an L to Neil Magny, but other than that, he was on a 3-fight win streak right before that. Li, very durable, never been finished. And Santiago, although he hits like a Mack truck, he is susceptible to being finished. All 3 of his losses have been by way of finish. I believe 2 knockouts and 1 submission loss. So I wouldn't be surprised if Li came right out the gate pushing the action. Really try to wear on Santiago early. Take advantage of that long layoff and that ring rust. Pretty much just wearing on him until he falls. I don't know why I think this, but Li got a very good body kick. If I had to guess based on the way I think Santiago's cardio is going to hold up, I have Li maybe dropping him with a body kick in the 3rd round. I think with a combination of exhaustion plus being battered by Li for 3 rounds, it's going to take its toll on Santiago. Like I said, Santiago, a very talented knockout artist. But with Li having the chin that he has, even if he does hurt him, I think he's going to exhaust himself trying to put him away in whatever round he hurts him, which I think will result in Zhang Liang picking up the win. But final answer, Zhang Liang, third round TKO. With that, we bring to you the co-main. Got two old heads going at it, Carlos Condit versus Matt Brown. Please tell me how these guys got 83 fights in between both of them. They've both been in the UFC for God knows how long, and they're just now being matched up for the first time. I don't know how Dana let this one slip under the rug for 8 years, but finally made it happen. Regardless, still a very fun one. They both could be 90. I'd still watch them fight any day of the damn week. But with Matt Brown, you got a very well-rounded fighter. Actually went out to Cuba to train with both their boxing and wrestling systems, which are some of the most elite programs that you can come out of. Vicious knockout artist. That being said, Carlos Condit, even out of 44 fights, has only been finished one time by knockout, which is fucking obscene. I don't even fucking know how you managed to do that. If Carlos Condit's submission wrestling was on point, whew, God knows how long he could have held on a belt for. But guess we'll never know. Both guys fairly susceptible to submission losses. About half of Condit's losses are by submission. 6 out of the 13. And with Matt Brown, out of his 17 losses, 10 of them are by submission. To be honest, I don't even know why I bother bringing that up. I don't think there's a chance in hell that they make this a grappling match, especially with both their jobs on the line. Condit's victory over Court McGee this year was his first in 5 years. His last one came at the hands of Thiago Alves in 2015. Matt Brown's similar narrative. Has only won 2 out of his last 6. Matt Brown, his most recent fight against Miguel Baeza, did get starched in the second round, so that could be an early sign that his chin's not able to hold up like it used to. Condit, of course, the much more durable fighter, has the definite edge in the all-around stand-up. But overall, if I had to guess, Condit, second round TKO finish. And lastly, we got the main event. Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar. And let me tell you, I really don't know who to pick for this one. This is a fucking tough one. I've been battling back and forth with this one for a couple days now. At this point, it's merely gut feel. I want to say Calvin Kattar. I think both guys fairly similar games. Both guys predominantly strikers. Max Holloway utilizes the angles very well. Long, great range, phenomenal output. Max is much more acclimated to the 5-round affairs. That, of course, from his reign as champion. Kattar, a lot more twitchy, a lot more explosive of a fighter. If I'm not mistaken, he has yet to go through a full 5-round fight. So cardio could definitely play a factor in those later rounds. Max Holloway, very durable, very elusive on the feet. The only time Max has ever been finished was at the hands of Dustin Poirier very early on in his career. He lost that via armbar. And quite frankly, I've never seen Max hurt ever. I can't even really recall a time where he was wobbled. Calvin Kattar, another similar narrative. Only has one submission loss to his name. Also never really been hurt, at least that I've seen. I really don't know. I am really struggling with this one. And merely just to correct myself, because I just checked, Calvin Kattar does have one 5-round affair that was against Dan Ige in his last bout. So he does have experience going the full 5. I stand corrected. I have to rewatch it because I don't really remember too much of it. But to jump from Dan Ige all the way to Max Holloway, who's recently removed from being the world champ, is a pretty substantial leap. And this could be me reading it wrong, but the last couple fights that I've seen out of Max, I see a fighter that's lost his passion for the sport. You can go back as early as the Brian Ortega fight. In that entire fight, he was having fun, flowing, enjoying himself, having a good time. But ever since that first Volkanovski matchup, he just hasn't seemed to been enjoying himself as much. He's not having as much fun in there. Seems to be taken almost a little more seriously. Even in the rematch with Volkanovski, where I had him handily winning it, I'm sure everybody had him handily winning it. Max literally got burned so bad in that matchup that sportsbooks refunded bets that were on him, because the sportsbooks felt that that decision was that unjust. That's how you know you've been boned out of a decision. When a bookie decides to grow a conscience and refund people's bets. I've never heard of some shit like that, ever. But that's beside the point. even in that matchup where he came ready and prepared, I still didn't see the same matchup that loves what he does. I just think he's lost all passion for the sport, which happens for guys sometimes. Sometimes it just takes for them to have a long layoff, a long break, recalibrate themselves. But we'll see what happens if the Max Holloway old shows up. Then I definitely have Max Holloway maybe pulling out the 4th round TKO finish. Potentially the 5-round unanimous decision. But if the Max that's been showing up keeps showing up, believe it or not, I have Calvin Kattar maybe pulling it out by a 3rd round knockout. Because there's nothing more dangerous than a fighter that does not want to be in that cage. And the sense that I get, Max does not want to be in that cage anymore. And Calvin Kattar is a straight fucking murderer. Not somebody you want to be locked in a fucking cage with. And Calvin Kattar, a very hungry competitor. There's no doubt in my mind that he wants it for sure. So no doubt in my mind Calvin Kattar will be ready for this Saturday. Actually looked pretty damn big on the scales too. Almost looked like a 155er. But all in all, gun to my head, have to make a decision. I think I'm going to give it to Calvin Kattar. Because like I said, I just don't think Max wants it anymore. If the Max that we know and love shows up, then I definitely see him making the climb back to fight Volkanovski a 3rd time. But if he doesn't, I won't be surprised if you end up seeing a tailspin out of him. Seeing a streak of him losing 3-4 in a row. I hope it doesn't happen, but for some reason I just feel that's the way it's going to end up going. And with that, we bring our first episode of the Combat Chronicles to a close. Thank y'all so much for listening. Please keep an eye out for the inaugural episode of the Martell Effect, hopefully airing within the next week or so. Just trying to get everything situated for that. But all in all, I'll be looking to do maybe 2 or 3 episodes a week. I'll be aiming to release the Combat Chronicles every Monday. And sometime midweek air the main segment of the show, the Martell Effect, which is a much more general lifestyle kind of podcast. Could really be about anything. Whoever I decide to really have on for the most part. So I'll be looking to do something special on that for y'all. And then if I have time throughout the week, I'll be looking to post a bonus episode on the Patreon. The link to that shall be down below. If you're interested in that, please sign up. You can pledge as little as $1. And for that $1, you can get up to 4 bonus episodes every month. Coming out to a quarter per episode, which I don't think you can beat. You're looking at between 4 and 8 hours worth of content every single month for only $1. You can't even so much as get a pack of gum for $1 anymore. So I personally can't think of any better deal than that. You get 8 hours of mind-numbing distraction from your everyday life, all for the value of $1. And in doing so, it allows me to grow the channel, make it a lot less bootleg, allow me to make upgrades in equipment, hire somebody to handle the audio and editing. That way it frees me up to do more episodes for you guys. That way you don't got a dumbass like me handling audio and editing, spending 3-4 days when I could be making another episode or 2 for you guys. So by doing that, I can focus on my job and creating good content for y'all. Allow me to push out as many episodes as possible. That way I'm not spending an entire week on one episode. But to anybody that listened all the way through, thank y'all so much for listening. I appreciate the hell out of all of y'all. Really starting to look forward to doing this week in and week out for you guys. Hopefully this one wasn't too unbearable to listen to. This is only my 3rd complete run at it. So bear with me for the time being. I will get this down. In the meantime, thank y'all so much for the support. It really does mean the world. Hopefully y'all continue to show your love and support while I grow and build this channel. I cannot wait to see what it turns into. And success or failure, thank y'all so much for allowing me to do this for y'all. It's been an absolute blessing. And with that, health, wellness, peace.